Chosen one, you have achieved a victory that remains a total mystery to those who once counted you out. While you were building in the dark without a single hand extended, your detractors were busy filing away a verdict of your failure. Now that you have emerged into plain sight as an undeniable force, the reality is that you won alone, and now it's eating them alive. Your sovereignty is the ultimate punishment for their lack of faith. It started before you even knew it was happening, long before the grinding, long before the silent building, long before any result was visible to anyone, including yourself. It started the moment the people around you looked at you, really looked at you, and quietly made a decision, not out loud. Human beings are too careful for that. But internally, in the private courthouse of their own judgment, a verdict was delivered, and that verdict had your name on it. This person has a ceiling, and the ceiling is not very high. You need to understand what that verdict was built from. It was not malice, not exactly. It was something more ordinary and more dangerous than malice. It was pattern recognition. Human beings are wired to predict. They look at where someone started, what resources surround that person, what the conditions appear to be, and they extrapolate forward. They draw a line from the beginning toward the most probable end, and they call that line wisdom. They called their verdict about you wisdom. Maybe it came from your circumstances, maybe it came from early failures they witnessed. Maybe it came from the gap between your resources and the distance to your dream. Whatever the source, the prediction was made, the ceiling was drawn, and from that point forward, every single thing you did was filtered through that prediction. When you struggled, it confirmed what they believed. When you stumbled, it validated the verdict. And when you were grinding in silence, building something in the dark that nobody could see yet, even then the people around you were comfortable because you had not broken the prediction yet. The ceiling was still in place. Remember that word, comfortable. This entire message turns on what happens to that comfort. Here is the answer. It shatters completely, without warning, and the fallout from that shattered comfort is the precise source of everything you have been sensing from the people around you. But we are not there yet. While the people around you were comfortable, you were disappearing. Not physically, socially. You were withdrawing from the noise, from the performance of justifying your ambition to people whose ceiling for you was already sealed. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped seeking confirmation from sources that had already decided what you were capable of. You went quiet, and in that quiet, something began growing that the people around you had absolutely no instrument to measure, no framework to track, no language to predict. That something is what this is actually about. While the people around you were living loudly, you were working silently. The time you spent alone, the period some might have labeled your lost phase, your slow stretch, the time quietly pointed to as evidence that the ceiling was real. That time was not what it appeared to be from the outside. That time was a laboratory, no crowd, no guide, no safety net below you, and nothing above you except the distance between where you were and where you were going. Just you, the obstacle in front of you, and the decision about whether to stop or keep moving, over and over, without applause, without confirmation that it was working. Consider what that kind of repetition actually builds in a person. The quality of strength that comes from solving problems without assistance, from failing without anyone to process it with, from course correcting in real time with no input but your own observation. That strength is not the same thing people build inside support systems. It is different in texture, different in density, different in what it can withstand. Most people's confidence is constructed from the outside in. It lives in praise, in validation, in the nods of people whose opinion matters within whatever system they operate in. Remove the praise, and that confidence wobbles. Remove the external confirmation, and the forward motion slows. That is borrowed confidence, functional enough while the loan is active, but structurally fragile in a way that only becomes visible under real pressure. What you built during those silent years was constructed from the inside out. Every decision made without outside input trained your judgment in a way no mentor could replicate. every risk taken without a net, built a tolerance for uncertainty that people in comfortable situations never develop. Every moment you chose to continue when stopping would have been completely reasonable, when no one would have blamed you, added a layer to something inside you that was becoming, without announcement, unshakable. What was growing inside you was not just competence, not just discipline, though it was certainly that. It was a self, a complete, tested, internally validated self that does not require external confirmation to feel real or to keep moving forward. That is what the people around you are going to encounter, and that encounter is going to disturb them in ways they will not be able to fully explain. They are not watching closely enough to see it coming. That is their first mistake, and it will not be their last. If this resonates with your inner knowing, hype this video to help fellow chosen ones find their way here. Let's talk about the people who surrounded you during the building years, not abstractions, real people, the ones who offered advice that was always, somehow, slightly smaller than what you were actually reaching for, the ones who listened to your plans with expressions of patient concern, the ones who reached for the word realistic constantly, reflexively, as though your ambition itself was the problem that needed correcting. These people were not your enemies. Enemies are at least honest about the opposition. Enemies show you the resistance directly, so you can push against something visible. The people in this category were something more complicated and more difficult to navigate than enemies. These people were invested in a version of you that fit within the limits they had assigned. They needed that version, the predictable, ceiling-respecting, manageable version, to remain the true one. Not consciously, not with any awareness of what they were doing, but in the quiet arithmetic of human comparison, your measurable smallness was delivering something to them. It was making their own position feel secure. It was making their own choices feel validated. Your distance from success was giving their own distance from their dreams a companion, a justification, a shared condition that made staying still feel like wisdom rather than fear. Psychologists call it status expectation bias. People unconsciously rank those around them, and those rankings do not just describe the world, they organize it. The rankings tell people who is ahead, who is behind, and crucially, who they can feel safely above. You occupied a position on that internal map, and that position served a function for the people holding it. Now here is the thing you need to carry forward. Every one of those people, the advice givers, the concerned voices, the self-appointed realists, is going to face a specific, unavoidable, undeniable moment. It is the moment when the version of you they have been carrying in their minds collides with the version of you that actually exists. And that collision is going to produce something that looks like celebration, something that sounds like support, but something that feels, if you are paying close attention, like the particular shock of a person who just discovered that the map they trusted was completely and fundamentally wrong. We are building toward that moment. Stay with it. Chosen ones. They never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it. Chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. And now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse-engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine, and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster. Synchronicities stack. Your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones. Press play. That's all. For $7, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. When the people around you redirected your ambition, questioned your direction, or offered that particular brand of concern that sounds like care but functions like a ceiling, understand what was actually happening beneath the surface. Those people were not protecting you. They were protecting themselves. Specifically, they were protecting a feeling, a quiet, unacknowledged, deeply necessary feeling that the world makes sense and that they understand their place in it. Your potential, the undetonated version of you that had not yet produced visible results, was a threat to that feeling. Because if you became what you were capable of becoming, it would require them to update not just their picture of you, but their picture of everything. Their understanding of what separates people who rise from people who remain still, their relationship to the invisible rules they believed governed outcomes. People protect their worldview the same way they protect their physical safety, automatically, without consciously deciding to. The defense activates before deliberate thought even enters the picture. So when someone moved to limit your vision, to slow your momentum, to make your ambition feel slightly unreasonable, that person was not making a calculated decision to hold you back. That person was making an instinctive move to preserve the internal architecture their sense of security was built on. Understanding this changes everything. The resistance you faced was never really about you. It was about what you represented. You represented the possibility that the rules they had accepted, the unwritten rules about who gets to rise and through what channels, were optional, and optional rules are dangerous to people who organize their entire lives around the assumption that those rules were fixed. Here is what cuts deepest. Some of the people who tried to manage your ambition during the building years were not operating from comfort. Some were operating from quiet pain, the pain of having already accepted a ceiling for themselves, the pain of having already done the calculation and decided the risk was not worth it, the pain of having already tucked the dream somewhere safe and told themselves it was the mature decision, and then you kept reaching past that point. Your continued movement was not just ambition to people who had already made peace with stopping. Your momentum was a daily reminder that the choice they made to accept the ceiling, to take the safer path, was a choice, not a necessity. That reminder is why the pushback increased the longer you refused to quit. Your confirmation of their ceiling would have made them feel wise rather than afraid. Your confirmation never came, and now it never will. Here is a truth that cuts in two directions. The silent period hurt you. Do not pretend it did not. The time without applause, without someone in your corner saying keep going with the specific weight of someone who actually meant it, that time had a real cost. Loneliness is real. Self-doubt is real. The moments of wondering whether the prediction others made about you was actually correct, those moments were real, and they were hard, and they deserve acknowledgement. But here is the other edge of that same truth. The silence was building something that the people around you had no framework to measure or prepare for. The silence was building your clarity. When there is no crowd offering opinions, the mind has no choice but to develop its own. When there is no outside validator confirming your direction, you are forced to develop the internal compass that most people never build, because the external input was always there before they needed to develop it themselves. When there is no one to catch you, you develop a kind of balance that only comes from learning to stand without leaning on anyone. Every person who surrounded themselves with constant input and constant social validation was outsourcing a portion of their judgment to the collective, and the collective is not always right. The collective is frequently operating from consensus rather than truth. The collective is often just a group of equally confused people moving together because the movement itself feels like direction. You were forced to think for yourself completely without the crowd's filter or the crowd's consensus as a reference point, and over time that forced independence produced a precision in your thinking that is almost impossible to fake. You learned to read situations without the distortion of what others wanted to believe about them. You learned to make decisions based on what you actually observed rather than what the social consensus told you to see. The silence was a factory, and you are what it produced. The people around you have no idea what they are about to encounter when this becomes visible, and then the results showed up. This is the moment everything before it was building toward. Your silence ended, not with a speech, not with an announcement, not with a performance designed to show anyone what they missed, just with results. quiet, undeniable, impossible to argue with results. The work you did in the dark found the light. The thing you built when no one was watching became visible, and the people who had held the prediction, whose comfort depended on the ceiling remaining intact, had no choice but to look at it directly. Watch what happens in that moment. It is the most psychologically revealing beat in this entire sequence. First there is a pause, a fractional hesitation before the response forms, almost undetectable, but it is there. It represents the gap between the mind's first reaction, which is confusion, and the second reaction, which is the one that gets performed for the audience. The second reaction is congratulations. Words that say all the right things, delivered with a warmth that is, to anyone not paying close attention, completely convincing. But you are paying close attention, and underneath the warmth, you feel the shift, the change in the quality of the energy, the specific atmosphere that settles over a space when people are collectively processing a reality that contradicts something they believe to be settled. The prediction collapsed in that moment, not dramatically, not loudly. It collapsed quietly, internally, in the same private courthouse where the original verdict was delivered. And the person who delivered that verdict had to stand in the wreckage of it and perform celebration while the rubble was still falling. That is hard work. It produces a specific kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone holding two things that cannot coexist, the original judgment and the evidence that the judgment was completely wrong. Here is what separates the chosen one from the bitter one. You are not here to punish anyone for this. You are not here to perform your victory in people's faces or to collect the debt of every doubt that was ever quietly expressed. That energy would make you smaller, not larger. It would keep you anchored to the building years when you belong in the result years. You are here to understand what is happening, because understanding it is power. Understanding it means you will never again be confused by the strange energy around you. You will know exactly what it is, where it comes from, and what it means. It means the map broke, and now the people who held it have to build a new one. Let's go beneath the surface of those congratulations. Something has been simmering since the moment your results became visible, something that will continue long after the public acknowledgement has passed. Your independence exposed their dependence. That is the specific wound, not your success itself. People can genuinely celebrate success when it follows the expected path, when it arrives via expected channels, when it comes with the expected support structure behind it. What people cannot easily process is success that defied the requirements they considered non-negotiable. The people around you built their entire approach to forward motion on a set of beliefs they treated as fixed facts. You need the right connections, you need the right timing, you need validation from the right sources before you move, you need the crowd behind you before it is safe to step forward. These beliefs were not invented out of nothing, they were assembled from real observations of how things appeared to work for most people. And so the people around you organized their lives around those beliefs. They waited for the right connection. They delayed until the timing felt right. They kept the dream at a careful distance until someone with the right authority gave them permission to reach for it. Then you arrived, having done none of that. You moved without the connections, without the timing, without anyone's permission, without any of the infrastructure they had been told was mandatory. And you arrived somewhere real. The wound this creates is specific. If you could arrive without those requirements, then the requirements were never actually mandatory. And if they were never mandatory, then the waiting was not strategy, it was fear. It was the comfortable fiction that the conditions were wrong, rather than the uncomfortable truth that the courage was absent. Your victory reveals something about the distance between what the people around you told themselves was stopping them and what was actually stopping them. That revelation arrives like a light switched on in a space where someone has been pretending to sleep. Suddenly, the fiction is harder to maintain. Suddenly, the gap between intention and action is illuminated in a way that cannot be easily dimmed. There is a specific pain that comes not from being excluded, but from discovering you were irrelevant to an outcome you were certain required. Your involvement, During the building years, the people who withheld belief, withheld support, withheld the open door, those people had a kind of power. They had the power of someone positioned at a gate, deciding who passes and who waits. What none of them understood, what no one understood, including you in the middle of those hard years, is what happens to a person who is forced to find the gate inside themselves. Because when no external confirmation comes and you keep moving anyway, you are not just surviving the absence of support, you are building something that the presence of support might have actually prevented. You are building the internal infrastructure of someone who does not require a gate at all, someone who stopped needing permission so completely that the permission granters became structurally irrelevant to the outcome. When your results arrived, the people who had been standing at the gate had to absorb something devastating. The gate was never the thing that mattered. All that positioning, all that quiet authority of being the one who approves or withholds, none of it changed what you built. None of it slowed what was coming. None of it was ever actually connected to your outcome in any meaningful way. You walked around the gate, not as a statement, not as a rebellion, simply because you were moving, and the gate was somewhere you had stopped believing in. The influence those people believed they had over your trajectory was always conditional on your belief in the gate. The moment you stopped believing in it, their authority over your path evaporated. And they did not realize it was happening until the results showed them the gap between where they assumed you would be and where you actually arrived. That gap is not just the distance between their prediction and your reality, it is the distance between what they believed their opinion of you was worth and what it was actually worth. Hold that, not as bitterness, as understanding. Because that understanding is what separates someone who moves forward cleanly from someone who wastes energy being angry at gatekeepers. You do not need the gate, you never did, and every level you reach from here will prove that same truth again, written louder each time. At some point, attempts were made to slow you down, not overtly, not with any declared intention, but subtle, social, persistent attempts to access something that would allow your rise to be managed. A well-placed comment about sustainability, a question carrying just enough doubt to function as a test, a reference to someone else's cautionary outcome, a gentle reminder of the obstacles ahead. These were not necessarily calculated moves. They were the instinctive behavior of people who have always been able to moderate others through the strategic use of approval and disapproval. That strategy works on almost everyone. Most people's confidence is sensitive enough to outside opinion that a well-placed doubt can create a wobble, a hesitation, a moment of self-questioning that shifts the trajectory. The tools did not work on you, not because you are unreachable, not because you are incapable of honest self-assessment, but because the confidence being targeted was not built in a place those tools can access. Borrowed confidence lives near the surface. It lives adjacent to the external validation that created it, which means it is accessible to anyone who knows how to remove that validation. Withdraw the praise, and borrowed confidence softens immediately. Earned confidence lives in the bones. There was deposited there through the private experience of continuing when everything around you said stop, through adapting when the plan broke, through facing the worst version of a situation and finding a way through it without anyone watching. You cannot reach something in a person's bones by expressing concern about their future. The discovery that the usual tools do not work on you is deeply unsettling to people who rely on those tools. Those tools are how influence flows, how social hierarchies hold, how people calibrate their sense of position relative to others. You are operating outside that system, not as rebellion, not as a statement, but simply because your confidence was never built inside that system and therefore cannot be accessed through its mechanisms. That makes you genuinely unpredictable to the people watching you. And people who are used to predicting find genuine unpredictability alarming. Let them be alarmed. That alarm is the proof that you outgrew the version of you they thought they had mapped. You outgrew the system. You outgrew the version of yourself they were certain they understood. And you did it without asking for their permission. Let's be precise about the title of this message, because it is not exaggeration. It is eating them alive, not dramatically, not visibly, in a quiet, persistent daily way that is almost harder to sit with than a single clean confrontation. It looks like your name appearing in conversations where your name was not necessary, not to celebrate you, but to contextualize you, to frame what you built within a narrative that makes it feel smaller than it is, nothing openly dismissive, just strategically reduced. You will hear about it secondhand eventually, because information always finds its way back. It looks like unusual interest in your setbacks. When something does not work, a project that stalls, a miscalculation, the energy around that information lands differently than good news does. Good news requires visible effort to process. Bad news arrives with a relief so fast it barely has time to be hidden before the expression reveals it. That relief is the most honest signal being sent. It reveals what has been quietly carried all along, the sustained, exhausting hope that the original prediction will yet be proven correct, that your success will reveal itself as temporary, that the ceiling will eventually reassert itself. It looks like comparison framing, pointing to someone who accomplished something adjacent to what you built and making that person the reference point for your achievement, as though your rise requires a context that makes it more ordinary. As though placing it beside something familiar reduces the scale of what actually happened. It looks like silence on your biggest days, the days when something you built produces an outcome that cannot be minimized. Those are often the days when the people you expected to hear from go the quietest, because those are the days when the gap between prediction and reality is widest. And the wider that gap, the harder it becomes to perform a convincing normalcy. Some people go quiet rather than attempt something they cannot make believable. Every one of these behaviors is the sound of someone being consumed by the friction between what they believed about you and what is undeniably true. You did not cause this by failing. You caused this by winning alone, by winning without the infrastructure they declared mandatory, by winning in a way that made the collapse of their prediction impossible to explain away. That is what the title means, not a single dramatic confrontation, but a slow, relentless, daily encounter with evidence that the certainty they held about you was wrong. And it will continue for as long as you keep building. Let that be fuel, not weight. Pay attention to this because it is happening in real time. The moment your results became undeniable, a quiet and nearly universal process began among the people who had held the verdict about you, a process of retroactive revision, a careful backward-facing rewrite of the version of events they remember, softening the edges of their doubt, relocating their support from where it actually was to where it needs to be for the revised version to feel coherent. You will hear phrases that should sound familiar but somehow feel new. Phrases like, "I always thought you had something," or "I knew eventually you were going to figure it out," or the most audacious one, "I tried to tell people about you." Let that last one land. The person whose silence during the hardest stretch was so complete you could have mapped the absence, that person in the version of events being quietly circulated within their own memory was an early believer, someone who saw what others missed. Someone who was saying all along what the results now confirm, if only others had listened. This is not just social awkwardness or self-protective spin. This is the mind actively restructuring the past to protect itself from the full weight of having been wrong about you. You remember who called during the hard seasons. You remember who showed up when showing up cost something. You remember the specific texture of the silence during the periods when a single word of genuine belief would have meant everything. You remember the energy in the space when you talked about what you were building, the slight dimming, the pivot to concern, the careful redirection towards something smaller and safer. You do not need to correct anyone publicly. Publicly correcting someone who is rewriting history costs you composure and keeps you anchored to the building years rather than operating from where you actually stand now. What you do instead is file the information accurately. You notice who is rewriting and what they are rewriting. You update your understanding of who these people actually are, not who they present themselves as being, now that the outcome is safe to celebrate, but who they revealed themselves to be when the outcome was uncertain. Character is not who someone is when things are going well. Character is who someone is when supporting you cost something rather than rewarding something. The people who were present when presence was costly, hold those people, honor them, build with them. The people who arrive after the results with revised memories and retroactive belief, observe them, understand them, and be accurate, without bitterness, about which category they belong in. You are operating at a level now that requires you to see people clearly. Remember the atmosphere when the results became visible, the shifted energy, the tight smiles, the congratulations that felt like something other than congratulations. The specific quality of unease that settled over the space when the people who had filed the verdict were forced to confront what you had actually built. You felt all of it without fully understanding it. Now you understand it completely. The discomfort was not about you, not really. It was about the collapse of a prediction, the demolition of a certainty, the disorienting experience of having a map proven wrong in plain sight, in real time, without warning, by the exact person the map was most confident about. And underneath all of it, underneath the fractional pauses, the convenient new memories, the tight performances of celebration, was the single most confrontational truth your victory delivered. You did not need them. Not their approval, not their networks, not their endorsements or their carefully positioned access to the spaces they assumed you required their blessing to enter. You built without them. You climbed without them. You arrived without them. Every person who assumed their verdict over your life was a meaningful variable in the outcome had to face the arithmetic. Their opinion was not in the equation. The result happened without them, as a factor at all. That is what is eating them alive, not your success, the irrelevance of their verdict. Now here is where this transforms. In the beginning, the verdict was delivered in their courthouse, their judgment, their comfortable certainty, their quiet confidence that the ceiling they drew above you was structural and permanent. But you have been building a different courthouse this entire time, silently, without announcement, one decision at a time, one private act of discipline at a time, one continued movement through doubt and silence and the complete absence of applause. In your courthouse, the only judge is you. The only verdict that matters is the one you delivered to yourself in the dark, when the easy choice and the necessary choice were standing side by side and you had to pick one. That is where your character was forged. That is where the real judgment was rendered. And the verdict in your courthouse said, keep going. The ceiling is paper. The prediction is someone else's fear dressed up as wisdom. That verdict, the one you delivered to yourself when no one was watching, is what produced everything they are reckoning with right now. Here is the final thing to carry. Every new level you reach reopens the wound for the people who predicted your ceiling. The discomfort does not fade with time the way people assume it will. It compounds, because each new result is not just new information. It is the original verdict being proven wrong again, more specifically, more visibly, more undeniably than the time before. A single result can be absorbed and explained away. A pattern cannot. Accumulation becomes a permanent feature of how certain people experience your existence. Every time your progress surfaces, it adds another layer to the weight they are already carrying. You are not doing this to them. You are doing this for you, but the effect is the same either way. You do not owe anyone a smaller version of your success. You do not owe anyone a pace that is easier to process or a ceiling that makes the people around you more comfortable. Your only responsibility is the build. Honor the silent years by going all the way. Not the version of all the way that fits inside someone else's comfort zone, all the way as far as what is inside you will carry you. Because those years were not free. The loneliness cost something, the self-doubt cost something. The absence of anyone clapping during the seasons when applause would have sustained you, that cost something real. The only way to honor what those years cost is to use what they built, to go further than anyone who predicted your ceiling ever believed was possible. Let them recalibrate. They will always be working from outdated information. because you are not stopping. You are the chosen one who built something so real and so undeniable that the people who counted you out are now watching from the other side of the ceiling they were certain was solid. And the most powerful thing about where you stand right now is this: it is not the destination, it is the floor. Go build the next level, the way you always have, in the dark, in the silence, on your own terms. And when the results arrive, the atmosphere will shift again. The energy will change again. The smiles will come a half second too slow again. And you will know exactly what that means. It means you won again. It means it is eating them alive again. And it means the courthouse inside you delivered the right verdict all along. Keep going, chosen one. The world has not seen your ceiling yet, because there is